we appreciate your interest and curiosity, and we look forward to your questions and in the chat. And I hope you learned something, because I hope I learned from every single person who's on the panel tonight. Thank you for coming, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Coach. And next up, our panelist is Mira Shan. A little background on Mira. She, while studying African American Studies, Law, Justice, and Social Change, and Music at Michigan, she helped lead the Michigan Wolverines to their first ever NCAA tournament bid in 2019. She's the program's first ever Tewaaraton Award nominee, and she was also an IWCLA All-Region second team selection in 2019. She's a native of Princeton, New Jersey, and a proud biracial gay woman. She's also Michigan's all-time winningest goalie in program history, the career saves leader, career save percentage leader, and as well, she spent her time at school volunteering with the under-resourced Black youth in the community, and she currently is serving as a goalie coach, a volunteer for the Harvard women's lacrosse team, and works full-time at Verb Energy. Mira?
What's up, you guys? Super freaking hyped to be on this. We have an amazing panel. They're just epic souls, and just wanted to thank y'all for coming out and spending this Wednesday night with us. I think it's going to be a really good time. Just open your hearts and your mind, and just like Coach said, it's going to be a really great learning experience. So hyped to be here with y'all.
Thank you, Mira. And last but certainly not least, we have Bryan Chilcott. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Bryan for a number of years now. He's one of my mentors, both in the sport and off the field. Bryan has enjoyed plenty of success as both a player and a coach in the sport over the past 35 years. He was a two-time All-American, National Midfielder of the Year, and a national champion in college. He went on to play professionally in the MLL and NLL, serving as both a captain for the Boston Cannons for 4 years and leading those teams to an MLL and NLL championships. I know he had a couple stints with a couple of NLL teams, and he's very well-versed in the pro game as well as the college game. He's been a college head coach, operated a number of club teams, directed camps, launched a number of youth leagues, and provided coaches education to countless programs over the past 25 years. Bryan's also a board of directors on U.S. Lacrosse. He's been inducted to the Hall of Fame at Fox Lane High School and the U.S. Lacrosse Hudson Valley chapter. And he currently lives in Redwood City with his wife, Karen, and their son, Cameron James, and is the executive director of the Firehawks Lacrosse Club today. Bryan?
Yeah, thanks, Jules. I was excited the moment you asked me about doing this. I was even more excited when I saw the folks that I was going to be sharing this platform with. To me, it is the most important thing that's happening now is people talking and people having open conversations and understanding each other. I think that's our only path to success, and I thank you for doing this. And for those that are listening, I hope you'll contribute both by sending in questions, but also taking the conversation back to wherever you go after you click off from this.
Definitely. Yep, go ahead, John.
I just want to say I had a little technical difficulties to start off the session, so I didn't get a chance to introduce you, but I just want to say on behalf of CityLax, how honored we are to have all of these panelists on tonight. Some of them are repeats from 2 weeks ago, and Jules, we're really thrilled about our relationship with you. Your seminal document that you wrote really got all of us thinking about lacrosse and how race affects lacrosse and how we can do a better job. And certainly CityLax for 14 years has been deep in this, and it's just, we're really honored to have so many perspectives, so many people raise their hand and say they want to talk about this too, so we can make it better. And so I appreciate all the people that are on this call tonight, but especially those folks who took the time as panelists to tell us their stories and give us tools that we can use to make our sport and our world a better place. So Jules, on behalf of CityLax, Britt, Gerry, Mira, Chad, Bryan, who am I missing? I just want to thank all you guys for jumping on tonight, and I'm looking forward to tonight's session.
Absolutely, I appreciate that, John, and just want to thank you again and CityLax for having us on here and doing what you guys have done over the number of years that you've been working to really grow this game in the right way. So it's a pleasure for us to be on here and continue the conversation. With that being said, for me, the first person I kind of want to just talk to right now and kind of get the conversation going is really Chad Toliver. Chad's experience has really been intrinsically connected to mine in many ways, us being at Rutgers University together, kind of starting off our careers together in a lot of ways from different backgrounds, but kind of seeing things very similarly and moving through the locker room in a lot of ways similarly. But it was different for me than it was for Chad. And I want to kind of give Chad the opportunity to talk about that, as how he was able to navigate college lacrosse in the realm of lacrosse with me and by himself. He told me it was the best, worst 4 years of his life. Chad, what did you mean by that? And what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so great question, Jules. My experience, I obviously say that all the time. It was the best, worst 4 years of my life. And what I mean by that is that I was in a locker room with so many guys who were kind of like in that bubble and in the position where they kind of fear what they don't know. And so when they have someone that comes in the locker room that doesn't look like them, doesn't act like them, I come from a completely different background. And it was just kind of different. Some guys never really got that chance to get to know me. Some guys kind of just got the chance to know me. And it was kind of like I had it, like we talk about all the time, as an ally. And obviously you were mainly my main ally and my go-to guy that I had to speak to about a lot of the issues. But there was just so many times and so many instances where we could have, maybe addressed certain issues and things could have been handled differently, but they didn't. And I didn't speak up on them. I would go to you and speak to you sometimes. And I felt like it hindered me in a way because I didn't trust anybody in the locker room. And I felt maybe some guys didn't trust me. So instead of just having those uncomfortable conversations and kind of just bridging that gap there, I just sat quiet and let it kind of internally, I wouldn't say internally beat me up, but internally frustrate me. And now that I see things for what they are and I have younger guys reaching out to me and they're kind of having the same issue, I think I'm in the position to make sure that they speak up and have those uncomfortable conversations, get to know one another, and really, really try and understand one another. That's my biggest goal for a lot of these guys, especially in the times that we're in right now. I think it's super important, and I'm glad we have the guys like you and the people who are on this panel to really bridge that gap for people who are in the same boat that I was in, right, and didn't have those resources. So that's one thing that I'm here for, and that was kind of my reasoning behind why I always say it was the best, worst 4 years of my life.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Chad. And one more question to that point, looking back on your experience, if there was one or two things that you could tell Chad Toliver in that locker room right now for those young Black players that are going to be dealing with these same problems really for the foreseeable future as we hope to kind of improve those issues, what are some words of advice that you have for those individuals?
Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to speak up. Speak your mind. Try to do it in a respectful way, but let them know when things are uncomfortable and you don't appreciate certain things that are said or the doings from what other people do. Speak up about it right away. Go to your coach. Try to bridge the gap with your coach. Try and get a comfortable relationship with him. Just speak up. Just speak up. Don't sit back, because I think obviously when I got connected with Silcott as well, I think I started to realize when we went down in Florida our junior year was the mental side of the lacrosse side, the mental side of the game is just as important, if not more important, than the physical side. And that's just that, everything just kind of connects, right? So I kind of just felt like if I could go back and say some things to myself, I'd say be confident in myself, one, appreciate who you are, and speak up. Speak up when you need to. That's probably what I would say to myself.
Absolutely.
Jules, I appreciate a point there.
Yeah, go ahead, Bryan.
I think what Chad is saying is critically important, that young Black men, and really anyone who feels like they're being dealt some sort of injustice, does need to speak up. I think the important thing that's happening now is that there's other people that can affect this, and coaches should be looking for these instances, not waiting for them to come. They should be taking proactive measures to check in with guys. Is everything cool in my locker room? Because it's important for their success as well as their players having fun. Parents should be involved in this, checking in whether you have white kids or Black kids. If they're on a team, making sure everything's cool. And the players that aren't Chad, should be making sure and checking in. It's really a community thing and a group thing. And to put the onus completely on Chad, Chad's got to speak up, and we should encourage young Black men to speak up. But everyone should be looking for those opportunities to make sure those things don't happen.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Bryan. And that kind of leads me into my next question to Coach Byrne. It's one thing for us to be players in the locker room, like you're saying, and there's a lot of pressure on us to kind of, navigate these things, speak up. But at the end of the day, we're in this together, right? And I think one of the most important people, if not the most important person in the locker room, is the coach at the end of the day. So Coach Byrne, as a head coach now at one of the most historic universities in the country, how have you been able to step up as a leader in these hard times and take action from everything that's been taking place?
Well, thanks for that question. I think it kind of segues with what Bryan Chilcott was just saying is hopefully all of us have not waited to a crisis or a moment where now you have to try to learn some new skills, that you've created an environment with your team where your door is open, that you've presented yourself in a way that someone who is not just teaching the X's and O's of the game, that you're using a variety of tools and resources and moments to teach your guys a variety of skills. And I know that's how I've evolved as a coach and as a head coach, even though I've only been a head coach for the last 11 months here at Harvard, is that when you're at a university, you have all these different people who are experts in different topics. And if you combine that with being observant about what's going on in the world, you can find a variety of teaching moments, not just about race, but about politics and civil discourse and social justice and things like that. So for me as a coach, my approach has always been try to have a mastery of the X's and O's, because that's really important to the relationship that your players and the respect that they have for you, but also how you model behavior, how you speak, how you address things that are going on your campus or in the world that reflect your team. Because there's every team in the country, I would think, would have somebody who's non-white, and so that you take those moments, whether it's finding an article or finding a documentary or testing, as Coach Silcott was saying, talking to your captains, talking to maybe some of the players in your team who don't look like everybody else on your team, and make sure you're taking that pulse. But you have to develop that rapport. It's not like in the movies where the coach has some transformation and the music starts and everyone starts opening up. You have to work at it to build their trust. And I think that starts in recruiting for a college coach. And if you're a high school coach, it starts with how your relationship is built when you're not between the lines.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Coach. And that kind of segues me to Bryan Chilcott, really. As another coach, he's been a player and a coach at the highest level for a number of years, but it's different and unique in that there's not many Black coaches or players in our game. Bryan, you really bring such unique perspective in that sense, having been able to navigate the lacrosse space, spanning multiple generations, right? I think you told me you're cautiously hopeful. What can you say to that, and how may things be different now, and what can we really do to improve from your perspective as a Black coach and a Black player?
I'd start by saying that I've been in this game for a long time, and lacrosse has been incredibly good to me. I actually saw something today where someone wrote that lacrosse is traditionally a white sport, and Bill O'Brien responded with, "Oh, really? I wasn't aware that lacrosse was traditionally a white sport." But for me, it was a white sport. Where I grew up playing, it was a white game, and I was the Black kid, not the Black kid on my team. I was the Black kid in my league. And I was very lucky that I had tremendous support, that there was no tolerance among my coaches for any shenanigans, and there was no tolerance on my team for any shenanigans at all. Like I as a high school player, I didn't have to deal with really anything, anything overt, I should say, anything overt. But I'm aware that it was always there. I'm aware that it's always there. And that's been part of the problem, I think, for so long. Why I say I'm cautiously optimistic is that things are starting to be actually talked about, right? And things are starting to come out on both sides of people of color saying, I need to speak up more. I need to be more involved in this process myself. And people from the majority saying, hey, I didn't even realize I was doing that. I'm sorry. It didn't even occur to me that could mean that to you. And so that's why I'm cautiously optimistic, because these conversations are happening, because people are talking, people are showing an interest in what is the problem, how do we solve it, and it feels different than it's ever felt to me before, even though it's much more broad and publicized, and there seems to be so much more racist stuff going on. It's because people are talking about it. I think that we're so aware of it, and that makes me optimistic.
Definitely, I appreciate that. And another question I have for you, kind of just pertaining to your unique position as a Black coach, both in the Firehawks and in the high schools and colleges that you've been at. How have those interactions been with your players and those communities, and how have they really looked to your leadership?
Well, one of the things that I've had people ask me before, why are you always coaching you're coaching a team of all white kids, why don't you go and coach somewhere where there's Black kids? And I do. They're hard to find, but I do. But I also look at it as the time I spent with 50, 100 white kids, they're learning about a Black man. They're gaining respect for a Black man. They're seeing a Black man as their leader. I think that it can have an incredible effect by me coaching white kids as well. As obviously I can help Black kids coaching them also. But so my experience has been very, very positive, but I also think very influential from the time I was a player all the way through my coaching career, that I have been treated well, but I've also treated people well. I treat people with respect. I think I do my job pretty well. I make the game fun for kids. And so kids leave with a positive experience with me. And for them, that's what a Black man is to them, right? That's what they've seen as a Black man, regardless of what's modeled in other places. That's what they saw as a Black man, and that's what they believe a Black man is, hopefully.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And definitely to that sentiment, I've always left with my experiences with you just being so happy and excited about the information and what I learned from you in our interaction. So I know those players are feeling the same. And it's amazing to have coaches like you in our game continue to kind of push that along and really break the barrier. So I appreciate that, Silcott. Kind of transitions into my next question to Mira. Mira's a young coach in the game right now. She just recently graduated, a little different than Coach Silcott and Coach Byrne in the sense that she's on the women's side and is much younger. Mira, I've gotten to know you a little bit now, and we've shared some similar experiences as mixed players in the game, but you're a Black woman, so things are just different, right? And how have you approached this as both a teammate just recently graduating and now as a coach at the highest level in the game?
Sure. Yeah, Jules. Two really great questions. I think number one, kind of transitioning from being a player, first of all, a Black player, and then a Black coach is a whole different beast and party at the same time, because you roll up to practice and people might not be anticipating what they're gonna be seeing. And so I think Britt and I had talked about this a lot, but when you're a Black woman in the game, you don't go or decide to go full time into coaching, because we got to make money and got to have a good salary under our belts. And I think that that's part of the struggle in and of itself. But really, man, what I've been trying to do right now is just educate as much as I can and as much as my heart can handle. I had a call with my Michigan team, my Harvard team, and we have we have 0 Black players right now in Michigan. We've got one on the team and then an incoming on Harvard's team. So that's a fight, but I think sharing those experiences and really just making people see that you can be a positive coach, and you don't have to be an angry Black woman or an angry Black man, which is how people sadly put us out to be all the time. So I think it's about sharing that positivity and that that similarity of it's about love for the game that we love, and finding respect within that. So
absolutely. And what's kind of been the response from the Michigan women's team and the Harvard women's team in terms of how the girls are really looking to you to be a leader?
Yeah, I think on both teams right now, they're really just trying to educate themselves. And I think identifying those gaps that we're all doing with all of our knowledge. Like, I think when I originally wanted to go study African-American studies, I was picking between psych and AFAM and was like, dang, like I just want to be able to talk about the Black struggle and the Black experience from not just my own person and personality, my own experiences. I want to have it academically in front of me to be able to say, this is what we're learning. This is what has happened in history, and read from these Black artists and these Black folks. So I think that they're doing their best to educate right now. Of course, raising money is awesome, and doing an Instagram post is great. But what does that really mean? So back your words, back your hashtags. And, you know, for everybody on this call, what does that mean to you? When you put a hashtag out for Black Lives Matter, what does that really mean? Are you having conversations with the Black people in your life? Do you have Black people in your life? So yeah, I think it's about education, Jules. And then I think secondly, you know, I was given a goalie lesson the other day to this kid who's 6 years old. And she said, well, I didn't think that you would look like you do. And the girl's just sitting there. And first of all, I'm like, how am I giving this goalie lesson to a 6-year-old? Like, dang, you're going to be flames when you get older. But, you know, and then she looked at me perplexed and was just like, I thought you'd have straight hair and blue eyes and your skin would be lighter. And I'm standing there and I literally was just like, oh my God, it's happening. And she's 6, you know, and that literally just happened last Friday. So I think that proves that, you know, even at a young age, and for everybody on this call, there's a ways to go within our community, and what we really want to learn and what we want to say to Black players in this game and coaches.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And I think something you really said there that is the bottom line to me is community, right? Controlling what we can control within our own communities. And I think that very much transitions into Britt's story. Britt, you resonate so many ways with Mira, but you've been out of the game for a few years now. I think your perspective as, you know, one of the only Black women trading it on your floor, it just adds a whole other dynamic. Talk to me about your experience at Penn, what you learned, and how's that allowed you to really shift into the real world and kind of contribute to the community that you're in?
Yeah, thanks, Jules. That's a great question, because at the end of the day, right, not all of us are going to be as talented or have the means to be able to make lacrosse our profession. And you have to enter the workforce where you are going to combat similar issues that you might combat on the lacrosse field. And for me, that has definitely been the case. I had a very similar experience at Penn, where it was a majority of love, but there were definitely some very strong hate moments where I was in pain, and received a lot of pain from my teammates, and that hurt. There was a struggle there to get through it. And one of the instances was a few of my teammates not understanding and wanting to have a conversation concerning finances. So a group of individuals went on a trip without making me aware because it was too uncomfortable to have the conversation, and then told me later. And I had no idea the entire team knew. And I was so embarrassed because I didn't even have the opportunity to try and find the funds or explain to my teammates where I'm at or anything like that. And it took a lot of growing to understand how to come at that situation. When I started, I was just pure anger, tons of emotion flowing through, which is natural, right? But I didn't necessarily know how to control it as well as how to communicate it. So I basically told my coaches, I don't need to do this. I don't need to play on this team and be with these individuals. You told me things were going to be different here. They're not different. And from the way I see it, you need me, I don't need you. Not the way to go about it, everyone. Not the way. Right? It's a team sport. Everyone's putting in the same amount of work trying to win that championship. And for me, all of that resentment and anger was just a total perpetuation of consistently in my life being the only Black person on the field, having to fight to show everyone I deserve to be there, having to show everyone that any scholarships I was given, or any help I was given throughout my entire way, I 1000% deserved it, just as much as anyone else that showed up on that field. And so I felt an extra onus on the field too, to be the best. I remember going to my senior year saying, okay, I was in the top 10 my junior year, but I want to show that there can be a Black goalie that can be the best out there and can go win a national championship. And there hasn't been one for a very long time. And so for me, that was huge. And so to have a team where I really thought we all loved each other and to have it sort of turn against me like that over just not asking one question, I was totally taken aback. And there was a lot of anger, a lot of tears. But what I learned from it going into the corporate world is people are going to mess up. They're not going to know the right questions. But sometimes I need to be the person, which I'm not saying is always right. which I know is also hard, and there should be more allies. But sometimes I need to be the person that breaks the ice. And so I actually did that at my company on a call of almost over 120 people. After George Floyd died, no one had said anything to me on Monday. No one said anything to me on Tuesday. And I said, you know what? On this very large call, I'm going to say something, because maybe all the white men that I majorly work with, white older men, don't know what to say, are too uncomfortable to say it, or unfortunately think they're going to get say something wrong, and then HR is going to come down on them. So I said, you know what? I'm going to say something, because we need to have this discussion, and it needs to happen for us to move as a firm. And so I made a statement on the call and immediately got tons of responses. And there was a lot of pain in that call. You know, I was almost in tears on that call. But right, having that conversation instead of coming at it with, you need to do X, Y, and Z, you need to do this, continual demand, instead of saying, this is how I'm feeling, this is where it comes from, this is the history, these are the stats, let's have a conversation. That is my experience of the transformation from what I experienced at Penn to then turning that into a more positive transformation into how do I now educate my coworkers that I work with that are all 35 plus with kids who they need to educate, who are all white.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Britt. And I think it just speaks volumes to the type of person you are to be able to transition from Penn really into that environment that you're in and contribute in such a positive way to that community. And I just want to say, you know, I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm proud to know you, to know that you have that strength. And kind of just to transition a little bit more with that, I know that a lot of our conversations have been focused around the idea of inclusivity and how can we push the game forward. But I think a natural reaction with a lot of coaches is that balance, right? How can we balance these hard conversations while also trying to focus on the game? So the question is to Coach Silcott and Coach Byrne. I'll let you guys, whoever wants to answer first, but how can coaches really balance the focus of inclusivity with the X's and O's, with the other things that need to go in the locker room, and how can we kind of begin to mesh those things together as we look to kind of start up the new year that's coming up in the game?
I'll go first. You know, I think that separating it from the X's and O's is a mistake. Well, I'll take Chad Toliver as an example. I want Chad Toliver at 100%. Right? He might be the best athlete on the field. I want every bit of that going 100%, totally focused all the time. And if stuff in the locker room is getting in the way of that, I got to fix it, right? And so I don't view it as finding time to do it. I view it as something that it's become clear now. We need to do this if we're gonna win. We just look at the win-loss column. You know, you need to do this to get your players as effective as possible. Beyond that, I think that even if you didn't care about the wins and losses, there's a lot of easy ways to build it into what you do. You know, you write out a practice plan every day and post it up. There's no reason other information can't be posted on there, quotes, sayings, whatever that includes a message. There's no reason you can't, you know, as Gerry talks about, emailing articles to your players, sending out videos to your players. There's lots of ways you can give them information. I've heard of tons of schools now. Stanford, I know, is doing it. I know the Harvard women are active in something. I think the Harvard men are doing something as well. You know, using their faculty that they have at their fingertips around them, some of the best professors in the world, to come in and talk to the kids and help them through the process, help them understand what's going on, and help them become warriors for equality. So, you know, I think how you actually do it is up to an individual coach and what works best for them. But finding the time to do it is a non sequitur. It doesn't matter. It's not a matter of can I find the time to do it. You have to.
Yeah, I would echo what Bryan is saying. Those things have to be integrated, because if it's not integrated, you're oblivious to all the other 22 hours of the day and what's going on in the world. And if you shut yourself out to that, then those 2 hours don't mean the same. Those 2 hours when you're on the field, you hope that there is no color. It's only the color of the jersey that really matters. And so the only way you can do that is if the coach and his assistants and the people that help manage a program are paying attention to what's going on in the world. And what that allows you to do, allows you to create a culture where they're open to the skills you're trying to teach them, because you've established your credibility and you're helping them get better and you're making this practice be the best 2 hours of their day. But then with the other 22 hours of the day, you're teaching them perspective. You're presenting arguments and ideas and situations and events that are taking place in the world that affect your team, not just because they're a lacrosse team, but just because they're members of the human race. And so when you can find a way to do that, I think your players, and it's not just at places like Harvard, it's at the whole spectrum, is that your players see you less one-dimensionally. And if they can see you less one-dimensionally, and you come at managing a team as a coach, seeing your players as multi-dimensionally, multi-ethnically, different socioeconomic backgrounds, coming from different geographies, coming from the variety of parenting that we've all had, you know, I can tell you from my experience and my journey, and partly why I'm on this panel is because I was the son of a New York City policeman and New York City fireman. My father was a great man. He was a product of his time, which is not an excuse. And I was probably as narrow-minded as he was until I was 14 and 15 years old. And then as you become educated and you travel and you meet other people, your world and your mind expands, and you realize that maybe how your dad saw the world is not etched in stone, and that's how change happens. And then you can go from empathy and understanding to utilizing education to action and feeling confident or courageous to tell a friend, don't say that, don't do that, that's wrong, that's narrow-minded, you need to educate yourself. So I've gone through the whole spectrum. I have two African-American sons that my wife and I adopted. We didn't do it for any other reason other than feeling that we were pretty blessed, and why don't we share that blessing with some other kids. And so, my journey is pretty unique, and I've done things and said things mostly through inaction where I wish I could go back. And now as I got older, I got to a point where I can do those things. And now I've gotten to a point where I'm at a place like Harvard where you're potentially producing the future leaders, CEOs, people who are going to invent things. Hopefully I'm providing them with a lesson of how to be a man and be a young man.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Gerry. And I think, one of the things that stands out to me between you and Coach Silcott really is just the idea of creating that culture where it's not two separate entities. These things exist with just being a good person, taking care of the individuals in your locker room and building that perspective over that 4 years for those guys, right? Lacrosse and real life aren't separate entities. I really believe that as a coach, you're developing young men and young women. And that development occurs, right, by speaking to these things and speaking to what's going on in life and setting those guys up, those women up for the next however many years after they leave for school. And I think kind of just connecting those dots is important. And I know there's been a lot of coaches that have asked me that. And I think you guys articulated that very well. I know in terms of, I have a question for Chad from the audience. Chad, I know that for you, there were a lot of teammates that perhaps didn't want to have those hard conversations or didn't, speak up for whatever reason. I kind of want to know, how do you deal with that, Chad? And if you could go back, what do you hope that those individuals that didn't want to have hard conversations, what did they need to know? What did they need to learn? And what did they need to ask you to be better teammates? Can't hear you.
My bad, I keep doing that. I didn't know how to deal with that, and that was a huge issue, right? And it's kind of piggyback off with Coach Byrne, Coach Silcott said, is your coach has to create an environment where that type of attitude, that kind of thinking is kind of foreign, right? It's not accepted. And if you can kind of create that, I think guys who think that way, I think they'll be more prone to open up, right? They have to get with the program, right? It's all in it. I think if you could grab an ally like yourself, I wish I would have grabbed you. And sometimes you did have to calm me down in certain situations and stuff like that and sit me down and stuff. But I wish I would have grabbed you and then been able to grab that person who may look at me through a different lens for whatever reason it was, and sit down with them and just kind of communicate or and try to figure one of us each other out. Excuse me. So I mean, that's a hard question. I mean, I was immature in a way where a lot of these issues I didn't really think about. I just didn't understand why people thought a certain way or did certain things. And I mean, I obviously knew it was an issue, but I wish I would have tackled them. And like I said earlier, I wish I would have addressed them and been man enough just to address them straight up. And then that's when I wish I would have been able to get my coach involved, or you were involved, in whatever our captains were, and tell them, hey, we're having an issue. We don't see each other. We're supposed to be brothers. We're supposed to be all in this together. He thinks, you know what I mean? And I think it would have kind of built a better foundation and created a better dynamic between, everyone in the locker room. So that's what I wish, if I could go back and do, I would have definitely done.
Absolutely. And I think just to your point, obviously we were in that group message today with Scott Bita, right? One of our captains when we were younger at Rutgers. And his sentiment is really, how, regretful he is that he didn't recognize these things that were going on when he was doing his best to be a great leader in the locker room. And I think part of this, right, it's a journey. And I don't think everything's going to be perfect. And I think people in the moment, a lot of the times these things aren't of ill intent. I think it's just of not understanding, lack of perspective, and people can come around. And I think at the end of the day, it's finding those couple individuals that are allies that you can have these conversations with, because they're always going to be around. There's always going to be decent people in a locker room. For the most part, majority of people are decent human beings. And I think it's, recognizing that we all come from different backgrounds, have different perspectives. Like, for example, Gerry's dad, right? Like, his perspective was different than Gerry's is now. And I think it's just, having that idea of non-judgment to that and being able to be level-headed, which is easier said than done, but then circling back and trying to approach it in a new way. So with that being said, I'll ask one more question and I'll kind of open it up to you guys and just kind of have a conversation. But this is for Mira and Britt. And I think, for me, something that not that I didn't notice it, but I wasn't as privy to before I really got on the phone with Britt, was like, this stuff's just different for Black women in our game right now. And I want to know for you guys, how has it been different navigating all this, and what's your hope to come from these conversations down the line?
Yeah, so, Mira and I had this conversation. I've had this conversation with a few other people when I really wanted to start to get the ball rolling, and really actually was approached to start to have these conversations more. And one of the reasons why I didn't start them myself in the lacrosse community, as this movement has started, is that, to be honest, a lot of the Black females that have come through the game don't stay in the game that long. And the couple that are there at this point don't have a lot of energy to keep fighting for what's right, and to keep fighting for human beings to be treated like human beings, because they've gone through that over and over again. And it is mentally taxing and it's tiring. And so now in the women's game, what Mira and I are trying to do with a few other folks is to get that going more. Because we unfortunately don't have a lot of individuals from multiple stages in the lacrosse field still really involved in the game. We don't have a coach Silcott, who was an all-star, still involved in the game. We don't have a Kyle Harrison still going, right? A lot of the women's game right now is a lot of young individuals. Then there's a few people that have been in the game for years and are still grinding, like, Dana Dobie, who's crushing it. But in reality, right, there's not a lot of Black females still in the game. And it seems that they have left the game for various reasons. And so now what we're trying to do is get them all to come back in some sort of form or fashion and say, enough is enough. And we have the momentum right now, and we want to keep that momentum going. And we want to see it across the game, not just in the men's game, but also on the field on the women's side. And so I think the partnership that, the men's side has done with the women's sides concerning the professional league, I'm hoping we can bring that to the college game, and we can spread that through, so we can sort of break down these barriers. One, of sometimes there seems to be barriers between the women's and men's game, and competition there. But then two, to say we need to come together here, put all that aside, and make some changes.
Yeah, and I think, Britt's a freaking all-star. I've looked up to her for a really long time. But I think kind of echoing that as well, it's, creating kind of what I said before, creating this new image of what a lax girl or lax woman is for younger players in the future. So Britt and I are really trying to pave the way. Shout out Jules, because he's been awesome connecting us on the men's side. But we're really just trying to pave the way and get new role models for younger Black girls and Black women to be like, yo, I can go pro, I can play in the WPLL, and that's a totally acceptable job that I can take on, or I can start my own LLC and I'll have enough money there to really carry me. So I think there's some really cool stuff. I think it's not just about diversity, equity, inclusion. It's way past that. It's about kind of bridging the gap between educating these folks in our lacrosse community that are really sheltered and still don't see the issues that are on the women's and the men's side. So I'm excited for what we got. Britt's a freaking powerhouse, and everybody else on this panel is dope. So I'm excited for what we're gonna do.
Absolutely, yeah, I appreciate that, Mira. A couple of questions we have from the panelists. I mean, from the people in this discussion, the participants, before we wrap up. One question, I'll kind of put this to you, Coach Byrne. What do you think about firing a coach for the actions of their players, and how should institutions respond productively to racist incidents that happen?
Man, that's topical, obviously. I think, for fair or unfair, the power of media, the speed with which media moves through our different life ecosystems doesn't always kind of align with, great jurisprudence. I think there have been, probably people who have stayed in a position for too long for doing wrong. And there's probably people who have been, let go too quickly and not gotten a fair, quote unquote, trial. I think that's a symptom, a bigger symptom of kind of the surface investigation that a lot of people do. They react to 140 characters on social media or a comment, but they don't necessarily maybe have the passion to dig deeper on a topic and get, reading a long form article or watching a documentary that covers a topic in depth. We want our stuff digestible, and we want something adjudicated really quickly. And sometimes that's done in the court of public opinion. And in the noise of all of that, the truth sometimes is the first casualty. So, I would hope that any organization, whether it's a club team or a high school or a university or a college, would, not respond to that in the emotion of the moment, and that would take time to find out the actions of what actually happens. And sometimes the immediate reaction does align with actually what happened. But we also always know that the truth sometimes is the first casualty on those things. And that's really hard, because I think some good people have been unfairly treated, but there's been plenty of bad people who've been probably in power for too long.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Coach. And I'll say at the end of the day, I think it goes both ways, right? I think the idea of innocent until proven guilty, as opposed to guilty until proven innocent, exists within our society. And, we got to do our due diligence to really find out the type of individuals that we have and we're dealing with in these circumstances. And it's unfortunate that the idea of social media can really contribute to that in such a negative way. And I've seen it on both sides. It's just an unfortunate thing. I have one or two more questions, and I'll kind of wrap it up. I think this one's for you, Britt. As a coach and parent, as a white individual, what are some of the blind spots that you've seen in your white friends, perhaps at Penn, perhaps with your job, that might not be ill-intentioned, but they were just unaware or uninformed? And what are some of those most common blind spots?
So I think some of the most common blind spots for me have been people thinking that I'm not as educated, which has been really unfortunate. So they'll make a comment about an article and I'll be like, oh yeah, I read that. I was actually thinking blah, blah, blah. And they'll be like, wait, you read what? I'm like, yeah, I read the article in The Economist. Like, I also subscribe to that. That's really cool. I'm glad you read it. I'd love to talk about it. And they're like totally taken off guard. Or that individuals think that like I don't watch other sports. So I'm a huge New York Yankees fan. I'm a huge Giants fan, even though, you know, they've been struggling as of late. And I'll talk about that with all the guys, and they're like, oh, like, we didn't know that you knew about it. I'm like, yeah, I love sports. And then another thing is they think that I played sports in college, but I guess they don't think I played at a very high level. So sometimes they'll talk about, you know, the guys that, you know, played at some D3 schools and be like, oh, Britt, like, you know, they played at so-and-so. I know you played here. It might have been a little bit different for them, but like they went to X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, dude, I went to the Final Four. Like, yeah, they won their league. That's great. And they played a few minutes, but why are you looking at me like I didn't also play the sport and run the sprints and do all the same? And you don't want to highlight me as much as you want to highlight, unfortunately, it tends to be the young white guy that just came onto the desk. But what about me? And the silence. And then the one last thing that really frustrates me, and it goes back to what Mira was saying, is individuals thinking that when I raise my voice, I need to calm down because I'm being too aggressive. That to me has infuriated me on the lacrosse field to work. In the locker room, I get really pumped up about a song. I'm singing the lyrics. People turning to me, hey, you all right? Like, you need to calm down. I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just pumped up. But then they sing the lyrics, they're screaming it, they're pumped up, and it's like, okay, you didn't say anything about so-and-so over there. Or on the field, if I'm yelling like, you know, hey, I need you to cut to the left, or you're not open, recircle. Like, if I don't have an exact perfect tone, which I've had to work on so much for my entire life, I've had coaches come up to me and be like, hey, like, you need to be more positive on the field. I'm like, what do you mean more positive on the field? I'm just telling her I need a new cut because she wasn't open. You told me never to clear up the middle. She's asking for the ball up the middle. Why wouldn't I tell her, hey, I need you to clear out and get a new cut going? Or at work, I might get heated up by a bad trade and I really want to make sure that the trade's done right. I'm told, hey, Britt, you need to calm down. You know, it's not that big of a deal. I'm like, well, the guy next to me who went to Georgia, who was in a fraternity, he just literally threw his phone on the desk and no one said anything to him. And he's literally 2 seats down from me. So what's the difference there? Why am I being reprimanded, but he's not? And so for me, all of those perceptions have definitely been frustrating. And have definitely caused me to change how I deal with certain instances. To bring it back. So I would urge coaches and teammates to ask the question in their head of, if it was me, would I be asking the same question? And I do this to myself too, because I also need to check myself. If the guy that I'm trading with is getting in my ear and saying I need to do better, not every time he does that means that I need to turn around and question him and say, well, would you say that to Drew? I don't need to do that every time, because the case is, majority of the time, the guy I trade with, he's treating me exactly like you would treat Drew. But you need to know the instances where that's not the case. And I've seen it repetition my entire life. So I personally know when I feel like someone is giving me an unfair shot based off of a tone they might hear compared to another peer. And then having that conversation, sitting down with them and saying, well, would you say this differently if it was so-and-so? And then a lot of the time they sit there and they go, yeah, okay. How would I do this next time? And I think it's that second point of having that conversation. When you have that uncomfortable moment, take a second. If you're not emotionally prepared to have that conversation, take a second, regroup, go through your thoughts, take in all that emotion, and then go back and say, hey, so-and-so, this is how I felt from that interaction. I want to know how you felt and how can we go from there? Because we can't have that type of culture in this environment.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Britt. I think you stated it so well. A lot of ways that individuals in locker rooms and different community, Black individuals are really feeling. I think that's the most well stated I've actually heard it. I've heard it from my dad so many times about how he tries to articulate how that feels. So I really appreciate that sentiment. I have one last question, and I think I'll just pass this one off to Silcott. You know, what do we hope to kind of come out of as a nation in terms of this movement, and particularly the lacrosse world?
Yeah, well, I think the idea that we are going to get rid of racism is yeah, I don't want to say it's ridiculous. I guess in theory it could happen at some point. None of us will be around to witness it, right? It's going to be here. So I look at it as from two different perspectives. One, in the world in general, my goal is to ensure that people are choosing a side, and that we don't have people who are well-intended and are good people and want to do the right thing and are doing negative things and perpetuating racism due to a lack of understanding. And that's, as Gerry went back to, it's an education thing, right? People, we need to have conversations and talk. It's what Britt was talking about, opening up your mouth, getting understanding out there. So the people that are choosing to be racist are consciously doing it. And now we're isolating, right? We're saying, okay, these are the folks that are really, really racist. Let's just leave them over there and they can do whatever they want because we've got all these good people here with us. So that's my goal for the world. And I view it from the lacrosse side is, man, we're a powerful group. As Gerry was talking about Harvard, you know, but that's lacrosse universities all over the country. You know, Harvard may have a few more than the rest of us, but you know, Duke and Carolina and Syracuse and Rutgers, they're all turning out future UPenn. They're all turning out future leaders of the world, and the lacrosse players are some of the best that they have. And so what we frame with these people that we're bringing up as lacrosse players and how they enter the world is going to have an impact. It has a bigger overall impact than just average Americans, because lacrosse players are not average Americans. I believe we're exceptional Americans and we tend to perform better in the world. So we have an ability to change things. And we as the leadership group within our sport have an ability to change the way the people coming up through our game view the world. And I look at it as we have to all be warriors against racism. Saying I don't like racism doesn't get it done. You have to be a warrior against racism. And I take personal fault for not doing enough of that in my life. You know, I've had a pretty comfortable life and I've let situations go. We have to say more, we have to speak up more, but most importantly, we have to be willing to listen and have civil discourse. You know, F you, don't call me that. It doesn't accomplish anything, right? All it does is draw a line, two people on two sides, they're gonna fight about it. There's gonna be an argument. Instead, we need to both get stronger. The person offending, the person being offended, and figure out a way to have discourse if there's any chance you can get this guy or this woman that's your teammate to be on your side with you.
Absolutely.
Jules,
I appreciate
Jules, can I add to that?
Yes, of course.
Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Sweet. No, Silcott, I really feel that, man. I think today NCAA reposted a post that I put out there, an article on being biracial and being mixed. And you know, I think to my own like hope for what the future could be, I was shocked in some of the negative comments that were on our men's and women's page for the NCAA. So, you know, one of them was just, can we just go back to Lax highlights, not this stuff? This account is for lacrosse. I really don't care what you have to say about anything else. And so I think to that point, you know, I was definitely heated up when I first read that and was thinking some things that I'm going to, you know, tune down for this lovely webinar, but definitely some explicit words. But I think the way that we come back fighting is we bring more people in the conversation and we have those hard conversations. And I think before I would have just been like, you know what, I know who I am. I know who my dad is. I know who my mom is. Like, I'm not going to say anything. But I think the difference was I wrote a comment back that was totally civil, like you were saying, and is peaceful, but also, you know, is just like, listen, read the article and open your mind and use that point of empathy that Jules was talking about at the beginning of the call. So I just want to shout that out as well. And Silcott, I definitely appreciate those words about civil discourse.
Thank you, Mira. And I wouldn't be a good moderator if I didn't give everyone the chance to really have their closing thoughts. So Coach Byrne, I'll pass it off to you to kind of wrap up, and then we'll go to Britt and Chad, and I'll push it back to you, John.
Thanks, Jules. You know, I think it would be nice to think that it would be a nice linear process. You go from kind of this new awareness that George Floyd and the things that have happened in the last month would create this nice linear go into a world where I think Bryan has some good points where that the people who don't agree with you and are overtly narrow-minded and racial, that they're either in the shadows or out in the open, and even within that discourse could be civil. You might have those feelings, but we're not killing each other and blowing things up and setting things on fire, right? That we can just agree to disagree. But we know it's not going to be linear. But I think you take people through hopefully a process where they have awareness and understanding and empathy, where people where I think people will get more emotional watching some movie that evokes some things, and they like that movie and they get all teary-eyed, and then they go back to being the same narrow-minded person that they were before, even though they were affected by somebody being treated unfairly because of the color of their skin or their orientation. And so, but I think if you can go through this kind of awareness into education, understanding history, how did we get to this point? I think that creates the potential for true dialogue. And then if you have understanding, then you can go to, are you not doing anything? Or if you see something, you say something. Or if you hear something, you say something. That takes courage. That takes, you can't do that if you don't have understanding and a perspective from history. And so I think that's, events like we're on right now and the different webinars, I think people who are open to the fact that other people are being hurt and offended and treated unfairly and the law is not being applied equally, if you can get them to that understanding instead of looking at it, hey, that's just an isolated event, bad cop, bad situation, versus being part of some bigger whole. If you can get people to understand that, then they can get to maybe the next point, which is telling a teammate, don't say that, or seeing some sort of act or action and intervening. Because not doing anything right now, you're kind of part of the problem. Not saying something or doing something, you're part of perpetuating what's already existing right now. So I think between education and understanding, and we're a society right now that doesn't like to read a lot of paragraphs and wants their news delivered in some easily digestible. So that's where parents come in, that's where coaches come in, using their platforms, using their roles to broaden the mind of the narrow-minded or expanding the mind of the people who are open to learn. Then you can go in your locker room. And for me, as the head coach at Harvard, I want to have my community affect the communities that we impact. So whether it's Harlem lacrosse or the Cambridge community or the different things that we're doing as an outreach, then we can change maybe one person at a time. And if I can do that with my team, then I can hopefully graduate, young men who can go out and be courageous about making change on their own.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gerry. I'll pass this off to Britt.
Thanks everyone for spending the last hour or so with us. And I think the last thing I'm going to say, I was thinking of saying something different, but I actually want to address a question that was asked. And this individual asked, given all the obstacles, challenges, and prejudice you faced during the time in the game, what kept you going? And I think that's a really important question because that's where I really talk about allyship. If I didn't have certain individuals in my life, black and white, that were there for me when it was hard, when I thought no one was in my corner, I don't think I'd be sitting on this call with as much hope as I do for the change that's going to come. And so whether that ally is a coach, whether it's a teammate, whether it's a parent or a friend, I think that's really, really important. And I also think too, doing some self-reflection of who am I, where do I want to go, what do I want to do, and who do I want to be 20 years from now if I'm talking to the next individual, has been really important for me as I've gone from the college game into now the career world. I personally know that 20 years from now, whether I'm trading or not, I never want to say to the next Britt Brown, keep your mouth shut, keep your head down, just make your money and get out. That's not something I want to have to say, like I've had some managing directors say to me across banking. And so I think for the movement to happen and continuing going is not just us, some young guns, right, giving the energy back to some of the older folks that have seen this time and time again, but it's also giving that energy to some voices that aren't necessarily mature enough yet to fully have their voice. And I think right now, a lot of us are at that unique point where we've seen a lot, we've had to deal with a lot. Our voices are here, we have the energy. And now it's time to also give that energy to the kids that are on the field that are maybe that 6-year-old girl, you know, that you're coaching in a private lesson, right? Maybe it's the elementary group that you're helping out with, whether it's Harlem Lacrosse or, you know, CityLax or Docs, or maybe it's your club team that you're talking to, giving them that energy and that confidence to say, when they go into the locker room and there's not a lot of other people around, to say, no, we don't say that to each other. That's not how we treat each other. That's not our culture. And the more and more we can have these discussions and uplift those individuals, then the more and more I think we're going to see change.
Absolutely. Thank you, Britt. 3, take us home, baby.
Yeah, man. I'm going to keep it short and smooth. Pretty simple here, right? Every single one of you guys are on this panel for a reason. When you hang up this call, don't forget that reason. I would say this, if you have a situation where you need someone to talk to, I think every person who sat on this panel, they are serious about creating change and helping you get through whatever issue that you're having. All right. Don't be quiet about the situation. Email, you can DM me. I'm sure you could DM Jules. You could DM Britt. You can email Coach Byrne. You can email Silcott, whatever it is, and whoever it is, and try to get your answers that you need, the help that you need. But my most important thing that I'm trying to just get to you all and get through you guys is don't forget why you were on this call. All right. Don't forget why you're on this call, and be the change that you want to see. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chad. And I'll just wrap it up. I just want to thank CityLax, for having us on and allowing us to have this conversation. I think this is really productive, and it was a great chance for us all to kind of speak and talk about our different perspectives. Coming from me, I think the biggest thing is I kind of continue along with this stuff is just continue to have empathy and continue to be there for one another, right? If I wouldn't have ever been able to be the individual I was if I didn't have that empathy coming from my family, coming from my teammates, coming to my teammates. And I think that's what's been the driving force for me. So, John, I'll shoot it back to you, and thanks so much for allowing us to be on here.
Yeah. First of all, on behalf of CityLax and the audience out there, I can just say that I'm humbled by all of your speeches and all the talk that you've had. And I just want to say how much we appreciate and give you guys a hand for the work you're doing. And when I say hand, I want a hand this way, but also a hand this way. Any way we can help, we want to help. CityLax for 15 years our saying has been, knocking down walls one ground ball at a time. I would say these talks that you guys have been able to do with us is a bucket of balls, not just one ball, but we're making progress. We are actually, from the notes and the emails and the conversations I've had since the first one, and I'm sure will happen after this one, people are thinking about life differently. And I think that's really important that we keep this conversation going. If you look at the pictures of CityLax, it's a pretty ethnic world. We don't have a bunch of white kids playing lacrosse. But I will tell you, when they go play in the college level, that's what they're going to face. And so you're giving our students the tools they need to figure that out. And also, when they go to the local drugstore, they might face it. So really, really valuable, important stuff. We have a great story about a team of women, a girls team that spoke 14 different languages. And at the end of the day, English was a second language for most of those kids. But they also said the language they all spoke together was lacrosse. And as teammates, they understood and they trusted and they loved each other. And I think there is a way we can use this sport to help break down some walls and pick up some ground balls and make things better. So on behalf of CityLax, we're going to keep doing this for 14 years. I'm hoping next 14 years, maybe the next 20 years, maybe the next 30 years, that might be beyond me. But and I'm hoping that the walls get shorter and that they go tumbling down a lot easier. And I can tell you that they will do it. You guys talked a lot about it. It's allies, and I even see the way you guys have become allies in the last 2 weeks, talking to each other and working with each other. That's how we win. We win as a team, and I think that is just fantastic. So you guys are not only talking the talk, but you're actually showing us what's the best way to go, what's the best path. So for that, I thank you all very much. I should let everyone know that's in the audience, we are going to do an all women's panel next time, 2 weeks from now. I'm hoping actually some of the goalies on this call are going to be with us for that one. It should be very exciting. And we'll talk about not only race, but also women's issues that are tied into this as well. If we're going to break down walls, we might as well break them all down, right? Not just break down some of them. So on behalf of CityLax, I want to say thank you all very much. If you happen to be a college player or know a college player who didn't have their season this year, I just want to remind you, we have our senior classic coming out of September 12th. We have some really great coaches coming for this game, some celebrity coaches. We would love to see a full team on both sides for men and women, 2 great games on a Saturday in the fall, which wouldn't that be great to be playing lacrosse again, and strapping on the helmets and strapping on the eye gear and playing some great lacrosse. So hopefully, if we don't see you at the next Zoom session, we'll see you in New York in September. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Be
Thank
well,
you, guys.
everyone.
Be well.